about themselves and their organisation, and share how COVID-19 has impacted on their funds and whether or not their processes have changed. And today with us, we have Andy Mannering from Hamilton City Council, ngā mihi Andy, David Cowley from Well Energy Trust, Jenny Nan from MSD, Sue Vicarage from DIA, Martin Bradley from Grassroots Trust, and Tarita Templeton from Trust Waikato. After our panelist session, we will go into Q&A, and I asked our live listeners today, as they're listening to each of the funders, if you would please send your questions through to our chat so that Danielle and I can pose these questions to either the whole group or the panelists that you prefer. And then once we've finished our Q&A, we'll finish up with some closing remarks and a closing karakia. Kapai? Awesome. Okay, so that's our structure, and I'll hand it over to Danielle.
Sweet. So we are going to have every panelist just introduce themselves and their organization and share how COVID-19 has impacted on their funds and if or how processes have changed. So Andy, we'll start with you, following with David.
It's whānau. So as has been introduced, I'm Andy. So I'm with Te Kanihira o Kirikiriroa. And as council, we're involved in an enormous amount of different activity across the city to improve the well-being of everyone here. Currently, that's from providing drinking water, removing rubbish and wastewater, looking after our parks, our playgrounds, our roads, providing libraries, pools, museum, the zoo, alongside the whole regulatory function of permits and consents, licenses, and city safety. From a community development or a grant-making perspective through our Hirotaki Whanaki Hapori, we look to support and empower our communities of place, identity and interest through enduring and effective partnerships. And we really use that lens for a lot of the way that we conduct our funding partnerships. We've been able to respond to COVID in our community over the last couple of years in a number of ways due to, I guess, the size of the organisation and the different things that we kind of touch base with on a regular basis. But, you know, we were able to provide new funding. We were able to give rent relief to some organisations. We've been able to support with emergency food provision and allowing an extension to some operating boundaries for businesses. We predominantly fund from a community and social development perspective holistically to support organisations on whatever operations they kind of need, really. So we've seen really little impact in the majority of our funding space. The one area which has been impacted has been the event space. You know, as we all are aware, a large number of events haven't been able to happen. So this has led to funding not being picked up and being returned. We structure our grants in a way that our single year community grant is just closed, and so we're able to pick up that events funding that has been returned or that wasn't used and allocate it through our single year process. So that's worked out at about an additional 40,000 this year to allocate through that kind of mechanism. Really happy to be here and happy to answer any questions that might come our way. Kia ora.
Right. Kia ora, Andy. Kia ora tātou. David Carley Tukuinga from Well Energy Trust, Grants Manager. We're a fairly broad-based funder. Our income comes from the Well Networks Limited Lines Company. The trust distributes its funds largely now in the last year or so through a discount to all consumers and a smaller amount through grants. In fact, unfortunately, our grants budget has fallen in the coming year will fall from about 6.1 to 5 million. Well, we're a broad-based funder, which means pretty much most organisations that are not-for-profits and are based in our region, which is pretty much Hamilton, Ngaruahea, Huntly, Raglan to Kaupara. It does not include sort of east or south Waikato in any way, and we're quite parochial about our boundary. So we're a broad-based funder, so we'll fund most organisations in the region and most requests in terms of we're not too specific about what we're going to fund. In the past, well, current is based on a number of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and that's the lens that we apply over our grants. We've got 2 granting programs. One's quick response up to 15,000, and that tends to be a more flexible, easier to get granting program with a 1 month turnover. And we're not so critical in terms of looking at them from that SDG lens. Our larger grants, however, community support grants, are more difficult to get. It's a bit more of an involved process, and all the trustees are involved in the decision making. It's a 2-month process, and we are looking pretty closely at some of the SDGs and impact that those achieve. We've got a couple of other little grant funds that are by invitation only, but I won't go into those so much now. However, though, we've got our investment strategy with that SDG lens has just been under review. And unfortunately, because of COVID things, it was supposed to be implemented sort of 1st of April. We've had to postpone that until June. So it will become effective in those rounds. And what that's going to do is increase the emphasis on things like disadvantage, equity, Māori, and some of the environment things in that. So it will change, be a bit of a shift in the lens that we look at applications and the funding decisions are made on. That's not been finalised yet, and we'll be open for consultation before too long over that. As far as the impact of COVID, the Trust in 2020, just as COVID hit, just about exactly a year ago, put $1 million into the Collective Response Fund, which was administered by Trust Waikato. And last year, not all of that funding was spent in that year. Last year, there was 500,000 tagged for that. And in the coming year, there's about 400,000 that's going to be tagged. What we found is in the first year, the demand was quite incredible. It was from individual organisations and lots of food responses. And we were quite busy, sometimes a couple of funding meetings in a week and all sorts of things happening there. We found that last year with MST picking up a lot of the food response, that lessened that a lot, and we were funding larger amounts to some of the things like the Kai Collective and the Salvation Army. This year we haven't had a lot of demand, but have sort of stated that our funding is there. Our funding is there to pick up on some of the gaps that might be left, and the others aware of Trust Waikato's funding and the MSD funding and other things. So we do have a specific fund for that available at the moment. And that's probably, in terms of events, we've had a lot of events that have been cancelled, postponed, etc. In just about all the cases, we've said, please hang on to the money, either use it for another purpose, if it's multi-purpose organisations, or save it till the next time you hold that event. Over the couple of years, we've only had $5,000 that's been returned for an event that was changed. Yeah, so we're encouraging people to keep that. And that should possibly put a bit less demand on our funding this year, which could make it a little bit easier to manage. So, yeah, that's us pretty much. Thank you.
Hi,
David. We will move on to Jenny and Sue, followed by Martin and Tarita, please.
Thank you. Kia ora whaketawhānau, ko Jenny Nantoku Ingoa. I am representing MSD here today. Before I go on to providing an overview from MSD, a big mihi to all of our community organizations for the work you have done so to date. Over the 2 years, the landscape has kept on changing, and you have risen to the challenge time and time again. I think as funders, we provide the resources, but as providers, as community organizations, you are the one who is doing the work in our front line. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also, a huge acknowledgement to all the funders present here virtually. We talk about collaboration, but nothing, collaboration came to fruition for us over the past 2 years. We've been working together. We pick up phone calls where sometimes one funder may not be able to fund something, but the other can. And this is the power of collaboration. And I think Waikato champions that in so many ways. So thank you to the funders here as well. Now coming back to MSD and our response over the 2 years. I have to say, exceptionally proud. I've only joined the organization 6 months ago. Prior to that, I was with my colleague Sue Vicarage at DIA. So mihi to you as well, Sue. and the mahi that DIA does. So MSD has been responding to community and individuals. So we are one organization that work with individuals, community leaders, not-for-profit organization, hapu, as well as iwi. So the response is huge and varies across the board. But one of the things we did put in place was funding for food providers, food banks, and that has happened over the past few years. In our food banks, so one of the things that was really key in that was establishing, maintaining, and building and maintaining those trusting relationships with food banks, and being a partner to them and providing whatever resource may look like to the food banks to respond to that community need at an individual level. Together with that, we also created community connector positions or partnerships with organizations that were able to work in COVID positive cases or community members who were self-isolating. So we were able to respond to communities that way as well. Plus, I have to say we are a bit of a mismatch, not mismatch, but a bag of different kinds of approaches. So we don't necessarily have a one-stop shop or a one way to respond. We are very agile and open in terms of whatever that response or need is in the community. We are able to listen and respond to it in that way. We don't have everything perfect, but we are able to listen and influence the system and provide that response. Sometimes we ourselves can't do it, and we bring other collaborative partners in that. But if you want more information or more insight into what I'm talking about, please feel free to reach out to me or ask the questions. And I think we can leave our details in the chat as well, Danielle. Yeah, that's all from me, Fana. Thank you.
Hi, Jenny. Oh, sorry about this. I've just got a live question for Jenny Nan. Jenny, are there still capacity for more organisations to get a community connector? And that was from Suzanne.
At this stage, we have got more community connectors, but I can definitely talk to Suzanne about what her need is. But not at this point in time. We don't have any more, but we can have this conversation.
Thank you.
Kia ora whānau, ko Sue Takuingoa. I work for the Department of Internal Affairs in an awesome branch called Hapai Hapori. Our work involves sort of a twofold process. We work with organisations and communities at grassroots level, supporting them to do their thinking, do their talking, and articulate their aspirations. And we really value the relationships that occur from that level of engagement. And we have some specific resourcing that associates with supporting communities to walk the path of achieving those aspirations. But in general terms, we have got a large number of buckets of money, for the want of a better description, and they've come about over a large number of years, and some of them are quite unusual and interesting and strange. For example, we've got the Pacific Development and Conservation Trust, which supports Pacific Islands to do things like install water tanks. But most of you probably know us more for our lottery funding and our grant, our COGS funding, which comes, the lottery funding is split many ways across a number of different types of funding initiatives, and COGS funding comes from a Crown allocation. So we're here to help anybody who wants to make contact about those sorts of funds at any time, and I'll put our details in the chat room. In respect of COVID, we introduced a COVID Wellbeing Fund And I think its timing was quite good because it was post our local combined pūtea, and we were also working with MSD alongside other Crown agencies to get to the money to the right place, and then our bit came along, so it was sort of a nice staged flow of that money. And what happened with that fund for us particularly was we unshackled a whole lot of our business rules and bureaucracy, because we recognised it needed to be a really fast and responsive process. So for internal affairs, COVID gave us a wonderful opportunity to do things differently. And because we had that opportunity, we've now got a whole lot more information, and right as we speak, we are dismantling and rebuilding how we do our funding and putting the customer right at the centre of that. Very shortly, we've done a couple of years worth of research on that and recognised that our funding ecosystem is very homogenised. It doesn't recognise Māori as a treaty partner in any way, particularly through its time of evolving. And we're going to do something about that. So COVID has helped to give us the confidence and given us a little test run around how we have got the power and got the ability to have a bit of experience for our customer base and getting what they need. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Sue.
All you, Martin?
Okay, Martin Bradley is my name. I'm the chairman of Grassroots Trust. I have with me Monique O'Hara, who is our grants manager, and she is the one that usually answers all the questions. So if as a result of anything that we say today, you have any questions, we have an 0800 number and an email address where people can ask grants questions. But just a bit of background on Grassroots Trust. It was set up in 2003 by the Waikato Rugby Union to predominantly fund amateur rugby in the Waikato. We hold a Class 4 gaming licence under the Gambling Act, and we generate money through gaming machines that we have in venues throughout the Waikato. Grassroots Trust is currently the 4th biggest Class 4 gaming operator in the country, and we are the biggest operator in the North Island. Our revenue's been down with COVID, or since COVID, by 20 to 25%, but notwithstanding that, in the Waikato for the year ended 31 March 2022, we will spend or grant funds into the community of approximately $7 million. We meet monthly. Our grants are audited, so if you receive money from Grassroots, we have a rigorous audit process to ensure that the money is spent on the things that you applied for. Our website says that our funding priorities are split 70-30 in respect of sport, 70%, community and education, 30%. That's more a throwback to our history more than our current reality. For the last few years, our grants have been 55% to sport, 45% to community and education, and long term, that's probably where we want to sit. We want to sit as a 50-50 funder for sport and community and education. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome, thank you for that, Martin. Martin, can I ask you, how has COVID impacted on your funds, and have you had any changes to your processes as a result?
There's been changes to our process. Where our revenue is down 20 to 25% at the moment. And we're seen as the only local trust in the Waikato, especially Hamilton, which is where our head office is. So our funds are very contestable in Hamilton. Some areas of the Waikato, like Tikawiti, often we don't get enough applications from Tikawiti to spend the money that we need to, but we do put our money back into the communities that it's raised in. So when we do our grants, we know how much has been raised in Hamilton. We have a list of our Hamilton grants and we go through them on that basis so that we ensure as much as possible that the money goes back to the community from where it came. But having said that, we do fund some national organisations as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Martin.
On to you, Tarita. Thank you.
Talofa lava and kia ora everyone. It's great to be here in good company, not just with our funding family here online, but with those that have joined us and participated in the expo over the morning. Just a little introduction. So my name is Tarita Templeton and I work as a Pawarahi and I'm a member of the grants team at Trust Waikato. A little bit about Trust Waikato for those of you if you're not familiar with us. Trust Waikato was one of 12 community trusts that were established back in the 80s. We were located throughout Aotearoa. For Trust Waikato, we have a vision for vibrant and resilient Waikato communities and a mission which is to invest wisely and grant effectively, and also to be agile in terms of our operation. And for us, we're guided by a strategic plan that's been in place. It's a 10-year plan, but one that we look at regularly to continue to make sure that we're hitting the mark in terms of reaching our most vulnerable communities. And recently we've done some work probably over the last 18 months to 2 years around establishing some PO, and I'll touch on them briefly, but if anyone's interested in finding out a little bit more, everything is on our website and we've got information around that expands a little bit more from what I'll say today. But I just wanted to let you know that we do have a commitment that we've put in place. It's an equity commitment. We also have one around sustainability and around some actions that we're taking and that we're also inviting our Waikato communities to partake in as well. And also continuing to do some work around our commitment to tiriti or waitangi. Or Waikato. What I wanted to touch on is a little bit around what we're currently doing in terms of our funding and what we've had established for a while, but also to move into ways in which we've responded to COVID's impact in the community over the last couple of years. So just briefly, in terms of our existing funds, we do fully support, I guess, what you could call transactional grant making. And by that, what I mean is we see the value in the work that many of our groups that we support, community organisations, groups, clubs, across the region are doing, and these may be smaller grants, what we could consider, for example, under 20,000. And so we have 3 rounds a year, community response rounds that are in February, in June and in September, and they remain as they've always been. People can come in and apply. Often we have groups that come in year by year and they cover anything from, could be events to equipment, includes operating costs as well as wages and associated costs. So those 3 rounds are there and will continue to be there going forward. We also have an annual funding round for our significant capital projects. And this round closes in June. All the dates are on our website, but it closes at the same time as our community response grant. And this looks at capital projects of $1 million or over $1 million. And normally, I guess if we were to reflect on the last couple of years, we've had a budget sitting there of around $3 million approximately in that pool for capital projects. One of the things that has changed for us in terms of responding to COVID needs is this year we've moved $2 million of that funding into a COVID response fund. So we still have our capital fund there, but sitting at a much smaller budget. And we have scope to be able to respond in a number of different ways to the needs, particularly in our vulnerable communities, in terms of the impact of COVID. Just wanted to touch on our funding. We have a capital fund that's over 430 million. And would normally, I guess, if you look at the last few years, we've granted around just over 13 million each year into our capital response fund, and that includes our significant capital projects fund. And then in addition to that, we've also had the opportunity to fund into what's known as a community impact fund, which looks at some new ways of doing things, particularly aligned to the strategic PO that I mentioned. Going forward in terms of responding to what's happening in our community, so 2 years ago when COVID first arrived into New Zealand, our trust set up a response fund, and that was up and running, I think, around late March 2 years ago. And as Dave and I think a couple of others have touched on, this was a collaborative response and a way in which we could pull our funding together and look at how best to support communities. And there were a whole lot of, I guess, sort of smaller grants that went out to help in a number of different ways, anything from some food packages, care packages, hygiene packages, an increase in counselling and interpretation services, all sorts of different things. And there we were responding to different needs that came up. This fund continued to be available last year in 2021, and then of course this year we've boosted it again by putting some extra funding in there. This time we've been a bit more strategic in our approach. And part of this is really around listening to what our communities are saying that is really important for them and what will make the best difference. So for example, we have put some more significant grants into helping communities establish hubs which are responding to the current outbreak that we're in. We will continue to have that fund available over the year, and we are talking to a wide number of communities across the region around how things are unrolling for them, how they have been going and what their plans are in terms of responding. And we're also, we continue to work with our other funding partners, in particular Dave and I at Well Energy are in regular contact around things. Just the last thing I wanted to touch on is with the development of our PO, we are really excited around the fact that we have an opportunity to really make a difference, in particular for our vulnerable communities, and that means being quite open in our approach and we're very much interested in the community voice and what communities are telling us that their priorities are, and looking at ways that we can then awhia around that and help support that. So that's me for now. Thanks.
Cool, thank you, Tarita. So we have a few questions that have come in that I might just bring to you all, and you just put your hand up if you've got a response to that for starters. Now, if anyone else has other questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A or the chat function now, and we'll work our way through those. So Suzanne has asked what funders are currently offering multi-year grants. If any of you have a response to that.
The Grassroots does offer multi-year grants. We can't do it for longer than 3 years, and it's typically for large capital projects, but it would have to be contingent on our funding stream remaining as it is. So whilst we say yes, we're prepared to do it for 3 years, we can't give a cast iron guarantee.
Thank you, Martin.
We're similar, I guess, with council. We have a process every 3 years that determines our budget through the long-term plan. So we can do some 3-year grants through a particular funding program called our multi-year community grant. Really original naming, but kind of keeps it nice and clear. Through our smaller grants, there is a mechanism, but because they're such a smaller pot, it doesn't happen as often as the bigger grants for our multi-year stuff. So.
And David, I can see you've put your hand up.
Well, it's a yes and no, because previously we had multi-year grants. We don't currently have them at the moment, but our new strategy has provision to introduce them again. They're usually done in terms of by invitation. So in other words, an application's come in, and we would consider that as being a possible one, and then have a discussion first.
Thanks,
it's yet to be finalised.
Sue, I saw you as well, and then we'll go with Tarita afterwards. Thanks. Oh, Sue, you're on mute. Sorry.
As many of you probably already know, we operated multi-year grants up to 3 years from the local COGS and lotteries budgets. We suspended those because of COVID, and because we needed to liberate that resourcing for a specific COVID response. I understand some of it has to go through ministers and things in Parliament, so things take a little bit of time in government departments for those reasons, but I am confident that we'll be seeing them return again reasonably soon.
Thanks, Sue. All you, Tarita?
So we do offer multi-year grants at Trust Waikato. Usually they are for a 3-year term. Multi-year grants are by invitation only, and we work with groups around what might best help them fulfil their projects and what they're planning. We don't have a set form. In fact, we only have one application form, and we adapt that accordingly.
Oh, yes, Sue.
Just if I might add something, sorry, I forgot to say, we're about to embark on some community engagement around redesigning our whole funding ecosystem, and we're hoping to hear from those people that we engage with what would work best for them in terms of length of time and repetition of grant too. So yeah.
Thank you. Now, this one's a bit longer, and I'm not entirely sure if it's directed at someone, but we've had someone say that due to COVID, they've had to cancel a big event, and another is still uncertain. And they're wondering if there's any specific support to cover the reasonable cost for cancelled or postponed events. they have said that these two events are important chances for fundraising and accepting donations, and essentially covering their organization's operation costs. So I'm not entirely sure whether they are asking whether if they had applied for the event, whether if it was cancelled, they would still be able to retain some of those costs, or whether they can apply for potentially lost costs of what they might have been able to fundraise through that. But if anyone would like to reply to that, you can start, David.
Yep, there we go. I mean, if, as a number of us mentioned, if they have applied for an event, funds for an event, and it's been cancelled, I'm sure that most funders are very flexible in terms of some of that being used to cover costs. I mean, you know, we're aware Hamilton Gardens Art Festival was cancelled, and we're currently negotiating with them in terms of, you know, how much of funding can be retained, etc. However, though, if they're coming and saying, look, we were doing this event in December or whatever, and it's been cancelled now, and we lost money on it, can we get some money? I would say the answer is, for most funders, certainly with us, is no, because that's seen as retrospective funding. And unfortunately, that's usually the case. Yep.
Thank you.
Grassroots is in absolutely the same position as Well Energy Trust.
Yeah, very similar for Trust Waikato as well. What I would say for us is that where possible, we would probably prefer that people, if they've had received a grant for an event and say it's cancelled, and in some cases, some organisations actually haven't spent any of the funding yet, and so we'd be inclined to say hang on to the funding for next year, and but you know, you won't need to put a new application in. So we're flexible, I guess, in how we look at things, and if you do find yourself in that situation, just give us a call and we can talk to you further.
Thank you. And Sue, seeing your hand up.
Yeah, much the same for us as well. We've got a time extension capability, and we're taking a very sort of gentle approach and flexible approach to extending out the period of the grant for people, and quite a lot longer than we would have normally done pre-COVID. And we also have a variation process as well. So it's the key thing is to talk to us if it's our particular money, and preferably before the end of the grant period, so we can invoke these system things.
And just following on that, just based on what I've seen thus far, I guess if these events were a fundraiser to cover your basic operation costs, it could be worth actually applying for those basic operation costs rather than the event, if that was in a position that you were in, if there were specific things that could be allocated to, whether it be, you know, your power or basic salary needs, that potentially it could just be worth applying for those specific items that those fundraising efforts would cover. So I think that's that one sorted. We've only got one left at the moment, so I'm sure other people have questions, so keep them coming. But this one is directed directly to you, Sue. They have asked whether COGS is looking at an increase in funding.
I don't have that information specifically, but COGS is included in our funding review. There has been some changes over recent years, whereby you know, larger organisations are probably disincentivized to apply to COGS, because it was designed originally for grassroots small grants up to, you know, 15,000 average. So it will be scrutinised as part of the wider funding review. There's a Crown panel thing going on at the moment. We know that COGS provides a really important place for people. It's design whereby the decision makers are elected from the communities we also value. So those themes are already coming through and into the sort of future design of it. So I can't say definitely that will attract more money. It is sort of a matter for Minister of Community and Voluntary to determine in terms of budgets. But our lotteries funds have had quite a significant increase this year. So in the Waikato, we've gone from 4 million to 9 million for an annual budget, and that's likely to stay around. So, and often our customer base apply to both COGS and lotteries. So swings and roundabouts, I guess, that's what I'm saying there. Yeah, so talk to your minister. That's what I'd say.
Cool. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Sue. And I just, so I really just want to thank you all for sharing your perspectives on the situations that have been occurring over the last 18 months or so. And there are a couple of real key nuggets that I took away, and I'm not sure if they're closing remarks, but I really felt like there were so many things that really did change, that were very, very much impacted by COVID, and it wasn't just our communities. But it sounds like, Andy, from your perspective, you really heard your communities, and you could see the impact that was having in for events, because you often Hamilton City Council is not just the funder of events, they're often the capacity builders of those events and the hirer of the community grounds that those events happen. So I can hear that that's had a really major part to play from that area. And Stu, it sounds like your organisation has realised or has gone, oh wow, in this time we really have to change the way that we work with our communities. And so how do we go and do that? And so you're really working quite hard to involve your communities at a local level in the strategic development of some of the ongoing work of your community grants. So that's just what I'm hearing. I'm not sure if that's completely right, but I'm soaking it all in. And Sarita, it sounds like that not only have you been at the forefront, Trust Waikato's been at the forefront of creating collaboration for COVID, not just amongst philanthropic organisations, but really leading the way with government organisations too. You've come to a place where your strategic priorities have changed, your PO have changed, the way you work has changed, and all of those came about really at this COVID time. Am I sort of hitting the mark here? You can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm just
very good summary there.
These are just things that I'm sort of hearing. And Martin, one of the things that was really profound for me was that I heard that you provide such a grassroots community service for sports organisations and for community groups, and it has been hugely decimated by COVID. And you're still really trucking along, looking hard to balance out the needs of sports organisations and community organisations so that can continue to happen. Did I get that right? I hope that was something, because that's something that I really picked up from the loss of your revenue, even though people could have assumed it came from something else. Dave, I heard that there were lots of different changes, but you were hugely involved in the jump on of getting onto COVID quickly, working with other organisations, making sure that Well Energy Trust response was proactive, timely, useful, and staying in the mix of that. But it also sounds like there's been some strategic changes along the way that will also go on to create an impact in the future. And Jenny, it just sounds like in the short space of time that you've been there, you have been like working at all sorts of levels to try and really be a huge holding space, I guess, for the needs of the communities who are most vulnerable. You probably need your whole own panelist session, to be fair, Jenny. Now that I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, I don't know how to articulate quite clearly the profound impact you have, each of you as panelists and funders and people who care about our community have, about changing our little corner of the world. That's my little ramble for today. Does anyone else have any remarks that they want to make as a closing before we close off with karakia?
Jen, have we got a couple of questions that have come in
Yeah,
that perhaps we could answer before we move to closing?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for all of your insights, Shannon. They've been great, and people have been popping some questions in whilst you've been doing that, so we'll give them a chance. Someone has asked if we've got, or I guess if funders have different pools, can you still only make one application per year? I guess that depends on different funders, but if anyone would like to share on how that works for them.
Grassroots, we don't have any requirements. You can make an application every month if you want to, but the chances of success probably aren't that high. Although we do support some organisations monthly just by virtue of the size of the support that they get. But we're certainly happy to entertain 2 to 3 applications per year from organisations.
Thank you, Matt.
At Trust Waikato, we're a little bit different in that most people will come into our community response fund into one of the 3 rounds, and normally that would be 1 application per year. But from time to time, there may be other sorts of activities where an applicant might be able to apply to a different fund. And if someone who's listening might fall into that situation, just give us a call and we can add some more clarity there.
Yeah.
Well, we're the funds that sort of generally support operational costs for community organisations. It is generally once a year, and there's the funds I've already mentioned there. But there's so many other types of funds, and so even if you are an existing customer of ours and you want to do something different, perhaps you want to build a significant building or a significant community project, then there's a separate bucket for that, and you're welcome to apply for that as well.
And just add from a council perspective, most of our funding programs are separate. The key bit for us is that council as a whole considers its investment and support. So if you're heavily supported through one avenue, it might have implications on decisions in another. But also the key part isn't so much the organisation, it's the particular part of it. So if your main thing is an event and you get funded through a community event program, you won't be able to get funded for that event through something else. You'd have to look at different ways to cut your budget. So, kia ora.
I mean, we're kind of similar. You can only receive 1 grant per year from either of our 2 main grant rounds. I mean, if you apply and get declined, you can certainly come back again. But we do have, as I mentioned, a couple of other little funds that are kind of by invitation, and they don't impact at all on the main grant rounds. Yep.
Fantastic, thank you. So another question that we've got, which I think is quite hard to answer, especially given that funds don't necessarily increase, but they've asked, with rising wages and expenses, how's the gap being met in terms of a funder's perspective?
Well, for us, it's all about the budget that you submit with your request. So, our decision makers live in this world and community as well, and they're fully aware of, costs that are increasing and things like that. So it's about putting it in your budget clearly, and often the funders are compromised by the total budget in terms of fully funding, but they can't fund anything that's not asked for. So I guess what I'm saying is put it in there, make it clear.
Absolutely. Can I totoko what Sue has said, and just to add to that is, with the living cost going up, I would encourage you to take a long-term impact, at least 2 years, plan for that. Look at your BAU and your COVID-related mahi, and what does that look for your business in terms of expenses, and then submit your budget accordingly.
With grassroots, we're handicapped by available funds, and we cut our cloth accordingly. So we do what we can when we can, basically.
Just to add to that, too, there is only a limited pool out there, that people can access to help support them. And just reflecting on with Trust Waikato, we probably get close to $3 for every $1 that we have to give out. And so it does mean that groups are having to look within and think about the role that you have in the community, the services that you provide, the way in which you deliver those, who you're working in with, who you could partner with, and just have some of those sometimes hard discussions around how you can shape yourself just going forward, knowing that there is limited funding support in the community. And so we'll often have discussions with some groups just around, listening and being a soundboard, but also encouraging groups to consider the current environment we're in and where things are heading, and what role they want to play in that.
Yeah. And I think, just to a quick comment in there, we're pretty much like the others. We're limited by the amount of funds that we do have available, but we'll certainly look at each application, and if costs have gone up, as they invariably will have from the previous year, we'd take that into consideration. But once again, it's the same amount, or in our case, in some, even less to go around. So it makes it a difficult task.
Indeed. And we've got one more that we'll go with. And I think that Shannon's also preempted some really awesome closing comments. So we might just give this one last question and let everyone just have like a closing sentence, and then we'll close off because we're nearing the end of our time. And so our last question that we'll go with today, and mind you, everyone's information is available on the Expo website. So if you feel like you've got other questions for particular funders or something's come to your head afterwards, just reach out to them. That's why we've got that Waikato Community Funders website up there, and contact details available. So last but not least, we've got a question from Robbie saying that how do funders fund where growth is happening? Often that you might have staff in place before you can apply, but how do you, as a charity, you can't necessarily risk employing a person when you don't have that funding confirmed in place. So just if any of you could answer that one, please.
My closing comments would have been around the idea that everyone in this group and the wider funders thing really are happy for conversations, to talk through your specific situation and what's going on. And so in answer to that particular question, I guess there's an art of storytelling, but a conversation before an application helps with that storytelling. And so, if you've had a particular size organization for so long, just doubling that in an application might raise questions. But if the story and the narrative are decided and the conversation has happened, then those who make the decision don't just see a jump for aspirational purposes. They see a jump with reason behind it. So as a closing comments, I'd be going, please don't shy away from the conversation. We actually really want to assist in making the process as easy and as beneficial for everyone involved. So, kia ora.
And I guess just following on from that, it's often not telling your story just to one funder. It's possibly getting a group of funders together and telling the story there. Because if an organisation is considering taking on another person, and the staff person, and there's quite a considerable cost involved in a salary, it's probably unlikely that any one of us would say, yeah, we'll fund the whole salary. However, if a proposition that stacks up and goes with the history of the organisation and where they're wanting to go, and the plan and the story is a good one, we all might be able to put some funding in and contribute towards that salary and make a commitment. to that. So, and I mean, my comment is the same as Andy's. Every time I sort of speak to people about what's the best bit of advice you can give, it's talk to us. Whether it's pick up the phone or invite us to come and see you. I know that's difficult now, but really it's communication. It's telling those stories, so that we get to know you more than just a piece of paper or an online form that comes in. So yeah, it's my closing.
Just one final thing just to add to Andy and Dave, just around that, is sometimes groups will contact us and they are wanting to I guess build their capacity or expand in some way, and are not totally sure, around the funding or the timing and so on. So I just wanted to just make a plug for the umbrella organisations out there like Community Waikato and Creative Waikato and Sports Waikato, who are there to be able to provide a free service where you can talk to them about where you're at and just get some good sound advice around where to from here for your organisation, and just to help with strategy and operations, governance, all sorts. And seeing as this is like my final word, just to also tautoko what everyone said around, just pick up the phone and talk to us. It is the best way to help you, particularly when there's nothing worse than working on an application and then finding out that you're not eligible or you didn't apply within the time frame or for whatever reason. So we definitely welcome your calls. Thank you.
But if I could follow on from Terita and also put our hand up as one of those organisations who can do that sort of work for our customer base as well. Help you with strategic planning, help you with problem solving. And because we deal with a large number of communities, groups, you name it, we've heard the most amazing solutions to the most complex problems out there. So we've got this sort of reservoir of, oh, that was a great idea. And we can share those with you. As well as our great collaboration partners that you see here today. We've quite often teamed up and helped with not just resourcing but solving some tricky moments for our partners out there in the community together. So once again, I want to really endorse the importance of telling us your story. We listen with sort of multiple ears on to that content, and there's lots of pathways that are potentially possible. Yeah, thanks. But we can't do it without understanding.
Awesome.
Grassroots. I would just like to say that I 100% agree with what previous speakers have said. The more we know about the organisation, the greater the chance there is of being able to meet your needs. The second thing that I've learned today is that there probably does need to be some greater collaboration between funders, because the need is so much greater, especially with bigger projects. We have people present to us all the time and we end up saying to them, well, where's the rest of the money coming from? And often they haven't thought about that. So I think, as a result of today, I want to probably connect with all of you and just understand a bit more about what types of things you fund and what sort of quantums, so that if we do have someone that comes to us, for example, with a good project, I can say, well, contact David at Well Energy or Andy at Hamilton City Council, for example, because they may be able to help you too. And often the community groups are relatively at a loss as to how they're going to pull the project together. That's just what I wanted to say in closing.
Thanks, Martin. And I think that just leaves us with Jenny and David, maybe?
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. I also like to talk what everyone actually has said. We are eager to learn more about your organization, walk alongside you, and be a good partner to you. We have a very community-led development focus approach. So please feel free to contact us. The other thing I also want to encourage you is look after yourself. All of the boards are voluntary. So take, pause, look after yourself, and in terms of well-being, wishing everyone safety and wishing everyone all the best. Hopefully we will get some emails and you will contact us. So thank you, Pano.
Thanks, Jenny.
Good. Thank you, Danielle. You're giving me another chance. I thought I'd sort of sum things up.
I forgot about you. No, you're good. You're good.
Another turn.
That's all right. I just want to thank the organisers of this. Previously, I've been involved in expos for a number of years, and it's great to be able to sit back. And this one, well, it's been quite different. It was amazing this morning with the workshops, and new folks came to us. It kind of almost reminded me of the live ones, because there was that same atmosphere. You were talking to somebody in front of you, but there were others standing by who wanted to get a bit of information as well. So I really enjoyed this morning, but even though it was quite busy and talked a lot, but I want to thank the organisers for organising this, and it's gone extremely well, but also to thank those of you who are there from the community organisations for your incredible work. I mean, the stories that I guess we've all heard over the last few years of just going beyond what you would normally expect in terms of just assisting the communities under very trying circumstances. So, yeah, kia ora and a big thank you to everybody. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. And on that note, we will be ending with karakia.
Thanks all. Kua mutu a mātou mahi, mo tēnei wā, mana kitea mai ma katoa o mātou hawa o mātou whānau, ai o ki te orangi. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope you're all staying safe, have found it beneficial, and take care of yourselves. Kia ora.
Yep. Kia ora.
Ka kite.
Bye.